You're forced to pay more attention to grammar, to using the correct endings when you're writing something as opposed to when speaking. I like to think of it as a kind of meditation. If you can make it pleasurable, if you can make it fun, if you can make it relaxing, that's absolutely the way to go. When I speak Greek to them or when I speak Serbo-Croatian to them, it just feels different. You immediately have a different quality of relationship, a more direct connection. I really, really love seeing the world through books in different languages.
This is the Language Podcast, and I'm Richard Simcott. On the show today, we have German polyglot Judith Meyer. In this series, we're giving you the tools you need to start learning a language. Today, we're discussing writing. Writing offers us a way to express ourselves more deeply and more intentionally. And that's true whether we're writing in our native language or in a new language. But where does writing come in the flow of language learning? Is it something you should be doing in the beginning stages, or do you need to develop wider skills before putting pen to paper? Judith Meyer is the inventor of the script hacking method, which makes it easy to learn to write in languages which use different writing systems, like Ukrainian, Korean, or Greek. Known as the German polyglot, Udit speaks 14 languages and is the founder of learnlangs.com and the Polyglot Gathering. Udit and I met many years ago on an online language forum, and I thought of her immediately when putting together this episode. Whether you're learning a language with a Latin alphabet or something different entirely, there are loads of great lessons for you to take away today. First of all, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking to you, and you're a great inspiration. Even on that forum, you were like the king.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. I mean, you are someone I've looked up to for a long time, and your ability to explain and express things, particularly when it comes to scripts and different writing systems, has been really quite inspirational. And also, I've understood how you've been able to break things down, and I really want to explore that with you today. And I guess the first question that people tend to have is, why even learn to write a new language? What's behind that? Why would we want to do that?
You were just talking about languages that have a different alphabet, and I think there the case is crystal clear, because you don't want to be in the country and be unable to read anything from store signs to street signs, bus directions, any kind of doorbells, restaurant menus. It's really the basics. You need to know the alphabet. And it is really not very hard. I know that some people choose their language like they choose between Thai and Vietnamese because Vietnamese does not have another alphabet, but that is really the wrong way to look at it when you can learn a new alphabet in a few hours, like not even a week of dedicated study. So I really encourage people to learn languages that have different writing systems. But I also think it's important to learn to read and write languages that use the same alphabet and not just to use audio-based materials. Because when we read, when we write, we notice a lot of things that get blurred in conversation or that we don't really pay attention to. Also, when it comes to beginners developing a good pronunciation, it really, really helps to see things written, as long as you can divorce what you see written in the target language from how you would pronounce it in English. But a lot of people don't hear all that well. I'm not even talking just about the senior generation, but young people, when they first hear a foreign language, they may not hear all the differences, the subtle differences, like between the Croatian ch and ch, like the letters that are both essentially like an English ch, like a chat, but one is written with a single accent mark on top, and the other one is with a kind of circumflex or an inverted circumflex, if you want to call it that. So if you look at the writing, you notice, hey, wait a minute, there is a difference. And if you just use audio-based resources, you probably wind up pronouncing both of them the same and then making a lot of mistakes. So it's just one example, but I believe that associating a sound with the writing is key at the beginner level, and it is also important later on, especially in languages like French, where the writing actually influences how you're going to pronounce it with the liaison and all that thing. So
I was thinking, because you do hear people say, well, all I want to do is be able to speak the language, and do I really need to read and write it? And I'm wondering, did you answer that just now by saying it's to do with the pronunciation and being able to reproduce the sounds of the language more authentically, because you can't reproduce them with, say, English letters or Latin letters, should we say? Is that what you mean?
It's not only that. It is also you're forced to pay more attention to grammar, to using the correct endings when you're writing something as opposed to when speaking. So whether that word ends in an O or an A kind of gets blurred and is too fleeting when you're having a conversation, and you can't exactly go back and study it very easily. But if you're forced to write like a self-introduction and you suddenly notice, I am not actually sure whether this word ends in this letter or that letter, or should I be using this case? Should I be using this form or the other form? This is something that happens when you're writing because you're using the language a lot more intentionally than when you're speaking. When you're speaking, you're just trying to keep up the flow. And then when you have a written text, you can also send it to a tutor to get it corrected and hopefully have a better version next time, so that you can improve. You can look up all the words that you didn't know. You can practice it a few times. I really like doing this at the beginner stage, just to write out some of the things that tend to come up, like anything that I tend to tell people about myself, about my situation in life, my work, my family, my love of languages, why I learned a language, these kind of things, which Boris Schechtman calls language islands. I tend to write them down, and then I don't memorize it, obviously, but I write it down, I get them corrected, and then I probably copy it out a few more times, and next time I have to talk about it, my speech will be a lot more correct, and I will remember a lot of the good phrases. I won't reproduce it 100%, that would be boring, but it will be so much better. So for the beginning, I really think it's necessary to have accurate written materials. I know that a lot of people now use, Pimsleur podcast-based courses that don't really work with writing at all, but I really like written materials, not 100% written. They should have audio, but they should also have very good written materials, like Teach Yourself courses are really good about that. Then to use those to copy the dialogues, but also to write something yourself as early as possible, and get the benefit of really thinking through what you're doing and not just trying to keep the conversation going.
So, I mean, you see this writing really as a way for a learner to be able to hone their skills in the language and get feedback in a more considered, more deliberate manner. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's definitely the biggest advantage for beginners. Later, of course, it depends on what you're planning to do with the language. If you're planning to live in the country, it probably helps being able to write formal letters, for example, to, get your TV contract canceled. In Germany, you have to write everything. But that's more like a personal choice. I'm not saying that everyone has to learn it. If you know that you're never going to write formal letters, then by all means skip that part. But at the beginning, it's really important. And also, we tend to hear about learners being more auditory learners or visual learners. And what people don't realize so much is that most of us learn better the more media, the more ways we perceive the same material.
If you're going to start from scratch, let's say, what do you think people need to be able to learn how to write in a different language. I mean, what are the fundamentals there? And what are the major things that someone should consider when they're going about learning to write a new language, whether it's a script or whether it's just a new spelling system?
I would familiarize myself with the letters first one by one. I mean, obviously, if it's a language with a non-Latin alphabet, I have my own method, the script hacking method for that. And then the letter combinations. Some letter combinations are explicitly mentioned in some language materials, like SCH for German or CH. And some of the letter combinations you only realize later when you're hearing them that they sound slightly different depending on the context. So I also recommend people to listen to how the same vowel, how the same letter sounds when it's at the beginning, the middle, or the end of the word. And then, to get story writing, I actually have a thing for pretty things, for pretty little books where you can write your own text. You can copy something from the textbook or later write your own compositions. I like to have little, sometimes I buy them as souvenirs. Like when I was in Dubrovnik, I got me a little notebook that had pictures of Dubrovnik on the front and back. And sometimes I just get these abstract little notebooks that somehow still remind me of the language that I'm learning, so that it feels really special and a privilege to write in these notebooks. And at the beginning it's mostly copying, because you don't want to fossilize any mistakes by copying things that may be wrong. Copying them once, writing them once is okay, but over and over, if you want to get it corrected first. And I also, when I copy things, you may think it's a chore, right? If you remember copying things from school, it might feel like a chore to copy things down, but I like to think of it as a kind of meditation. You can put a little meditative music on, or put a nice setting, maybe with a candle, and then you can just write out things and use your very best handwriting, or Chinese characters are particularly nice to write like that. I love that, but even any language works very well.
It's interesting because what I'm hearing from you is really the personalization of the whole experience and making it fit something that's meaningful for you and for what motivates you as well to actually go through that experience. So whether it's something that generates memories or thoughts or feelings and emotions, or puts you in a relaxed state and makes you really want to learn more, I think it's a really nice message to share with people. And those examples you gave are just wonderful. I hope that they will chime for other people out there as well to think about their personal journey when it comes to practicing writing in different languages, writing the scripts and learning as they go through maybe even your book, the script hacking books.
What you mentioned, learning in a relaxing state is of course nice for the personal experience, but it also has a basis in science, because when you're relaxed, when you're feeling good, you're so much more likely to remember what you've been doing. So if one of our listeners has been the kind of things learning has to be hard, it has to feel bad, it has to be stressful, because that's how it worked at school. That's absolutely not the recommended way to learn things. If you can make it pleasurable, if you can make it fun, if you can make it relaxing, that's absolutely the way to go, and all studies point that way.
Yeah, well, that's nice to have it backed up with science as well, isn't it? And do you think that doing this, learning to write, is something that we should tackle before we start speaking? Or is there even any real preferred order when it comes to learning these things?
No, I personally like to vary the order based on my own priorities. There are languages where I've never learned to write. For example, Japanese, I did a challenge where I tried to understand a Japanese TV series just to understand the next episode without subtitles. That was my goal. And I knew zero Japanese, and I managed to get to that level. in just 30 days of study, because I cut out writing, I cut out speaking, I cut out reading, which in Japanese is a lot of time that you need to spend if you want to do any of that. And then I focused 100% only on the vocabulary used in that series. And when you make a decision like that, you can advance very quickly in a particular goal. But if your aim is to have like an overall good level, then writing is definitely part of that. For the basic levels, you need to be able to do basic writing, answering emails, engaging in social media, that kind of writing. Formal letter writing is a matter that you can decide whether you want to do it, or being able to write essays. This is something you need to master if you're planning to do a language exam at some point, because they will ask you to do that. But I wouldn't necessarily learn it if I don't have a plan to do that later in life. There's this thing I noticed in my languages, which is that they always adjust to the level at which I use them. For example, in Chinese, I used to be able to write essays in Chinese. I did that for a class in 2014. But since 2014, I haven't written a single essay or much of anything in Chinese. And now I cannot even write the same essays that I wrote. So the ability really goes away if you don't use it, which means that you shouldn't try to acquire an ability that you're not going to use. Or maybe you can do it for fun, but you shouldn't have unrealistic expectations. On the other hand, when you need something, like in my case, when I suddenly needed to be able to read political content in Greek, I was able to acquire this ability within 2 or 3 months. So the language adjusts to what you do in it. And if you have something that you regularly do in the language, your level will follow suit. And if you stop using that, then it will also decrease again. So it really helps when you're starting out to learn a language to have an idea of what you'd want to be able to do in that language, and then to focus on those areas. But also leave room for serendipity, because you may start out thinking that you're going to use the language for one thing, and then suddenly you fall in love with the cinema or the songs, or you suddenly have a pen pal and you went up writing a lot of things. So I always think it's good to set out particular goals to start, but also to be open to adjusting them afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you said, the idea of if you don't use it, you lose it. And of course, if you don't use it and you lose it, did you need it in the first place? Yeah, it's a real conundrum, I think, as a learner, because it's not always simple to see. But as you grow in your learning and your experience with the language, I guess, these things weed themselves out, like you said with your Chinese.
Yeah, I think that it has to be normalized among polyglots to say, I used to be really good at this language, but then my life shifted and I wasn't using it for the same things anymore. And now my level is kind of worse than it was, rather than to try to pretend it's still the same or force yourself to write an essay every week or something just to keep up that level when you don't actually have a use for it. For the beginner languages and lower intermediate, I force myself to invest time in them and just get better at the language, just in the expectation that it will be useful. But once I'm upper intermediate or advanced in a language, I just kind of let the language float, and it will adjust to what I actually want to use it for.
When you talked about formality and things as well in language, and obviously there are different levels of formality. But also, there are some languages, I guess, that there's a very big difference between the spoken version of the language and the written form, or written forms of the language. How often have you seen this, and what kind of challenges do you think these kinds of differences pose to the learner?
Well, it depends on the language. The worst is probably Arabic, because when I started learning Arabic, there were materials like textbooks only for the written version of the language, which is, however, really difficult to use in conversation, or it always feels very stilted when you use it in conversation. Nowadays, it's better. You can find materials that teach you spoken Arabic and that try to write it also that way. There are a lot more materials like easy readers and so on written in the Arabic dialects. And the other way is generally harder. If the language is very different in its spoken and written form, it is really hard to acquire the written form on the high enough level without, reading a lot of it, exposing yourself to a lot of this written language. Greek is kind of in this situation. All the beginner textbooks, they use a language that's very, very close to the spoken language. But then you get to the written form, the higher level registers, and you suddenly have very different vocabularies, partly different grammar, a lot of expressions. And one of the challenges is to even just keep it apart. Sometimes I went up using expressions in my spoken Greek, which are really written only. And since I'm a foreigner, the reaction may be, oh wow, this written Greek, but really it's not appropriate. And I'd prefer the conversations to stay natural and not to get kind of sidelined by me using a written expression in my spoken Greek. Chinese is another language in which there is a huge difference between the spoken language and the written forms, because the spoken Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, usually uses two-syllable words, and then in the written registers, apart from chat language, or you really have a lot of one-syllable words. It's a matter of getting used to it and a lot of exposure. Basically, if you read a lot, then your writing will also be good. Even in our native language, it's the same, I think. But it is especially important for languages where there's such a huge difference.
When you talk about that with Greek and Chinese, and your sort of struggles with sometimes straddling the colloquial and the formal, is that something that we should do first? Should we tackle the formal first before we think about trying to use colloquial language on, say, social media or somewhere? Or does it really depend on where the individual learner plans to actually use it?
I would generally say no, don't try to use the formal first, because it will prevent you from having a lot of fun interactions with the native speakers. I think for the beginner, the goal is really to be able to talk to people, and for the other person that you're talking to visibly be enjoying themselves. And that just doesn't happen when you use very formal language with them. You're not in the right context for that. But obviously, if you're in very particular situations, like if you learn a language in order to be your company's chief negotiator or something, then maybe you want to start with a formal language. But yeah, it's not the average learner, I think, should definitely start with informal, and maybe not totally colloquial. The version of the language that's taught in the beginner textbooks is usually the right one. Sometimes they teach the wrong version, but that's a fault of the textbook.
So if you're studying a language with a Latin alphabet like English, and, for example, a language where you either don't have an alphabet or it's a completely different alphabet, what are the added issues or challenges for the learner? Or even, are there added issues or challenges for the learner when it comes to learning something completely different?
Well, a lot of people are put off by it. That is the first challenge. You have to actually decide that you want to master this and find a good way to learn it, a way that doesn't overtax the brain. But afterwards, there is a point where your brain, or maybe it's your eyes, but I think it's a combination, still sees this text as a picture. Like you're looking at a text in Chinese and you're unable to perceive it as letters or words. It's just a nice drawing, and you really have to focus in order to recognize it as something that is comprehensible. That is not usually something that happens when you learn a language that uses the Latin alphabet. You can always see that there are words and there's patterns, and even if you come across a text where you only know like 20% of the words, you will still recognize those 20%, but in Chinese it doesn't happen. That is why my script hacking books include exercises for this, where it's kind of like a word search. You just have this text which you're not supposed to be able to understand, but you're trying to find the letters within this picture, just to get your brain to start processing the picture as a series of letters. Another challenge is reading speed. So once you get into reading books in your target language, your reading speed will probably be much slower if the language uses a different alphabet, just because your eyes don't have the habit of parsing several letters together as one unit. So it takes a bit longer to work up to reading speed. And one way that you can overcome this is by trying speed reading. I mean, it won't be very speedy when you're doing this in a foreign language, but just use the same techniques that people learn people use in order to learn speed reading, like with a pointer, with a timer, covering part of the text and so on, just to get yourself to read it faster than you normally comfortably would. When you later try it without those tools, then you find that you're also reading faster than you previously did. One thing that is actually better about learning a language that uses a non-Latin alphabet is that usually the correspondence between the sounds and the letters is much, much better than if you try to write the same language in Latin letters. And of course, it is miles and miles better than English spelling. I don't know who had the idea to spell English the way it is spelled, but there cannot. Basically, every language, with the possible exception of Tibetan, has better spelling, and it is always worth learning those few extra letters in order to not have to learn how to spell every single word.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people can agree that English spelling sometimes is perplexing. Probably is the best word I can think to describe it. Love, travel, study, work, friendship, whatever your reason for wanting to learn a new language, Teach Yourself provides the tools you need. Choose from over 70 languages and teach yourself today. Listeners of the Language Podcast get a special 20% discount on Udit's script hacking series of books. Go to teachyourself.com and use the code in the show notes. Rely on Teach Yourself, trusted by language learners for over 85 years. I mean, you mentioned your script hacking series and the method that you have. Could you just go a little bit deeper into how that helps people learn languages with different scripts?
The basic problem is that when you have a textbook that teaches you a language that doesn't use the Latin alphabet, let's say a Persian textbook, Arabic textbook, any of these, they generally give you a whole table full of all the letters and all the forms. And then on the very next page, you're expected to read a dialogue written in that script. And that's absolutely not how the brain functions. The brain cannot just memorize this table and then suddenly apply it and read words that don't even make sense to you at that time. My script hacking approach is very brain friendly. I really break it down to the smallest possible thing that you could learn, one letter at a time. And also I avoid teaching you all the target language vocabulary. I teach you these letters using words that you already recognize. And it creates this effect that is similar to small children that are learning their letters, that every time you can decipher something, you're so happy. You read Korean, you've just learned your third letter of Korean, and you can read banana. It's this effect that makes learning to read another alphabet so much fun. Even if you don't have any use for the alphabet, it's just fun to be able to read things and figure things out. So my books contain a lot of these exercises of reading words written in these foreign alphabets, but which you'll be able to recognize, which are of course real target language words. I'm not making them up. I'm not using, say, Korean to write English, but I give you words that are familiar. Cognates, for example, names and the like, and you do a lot of reading, and then you get another letter, and you do a lot more reading, and this reading also reinforces the previous letters that you learned. So by the end of the book, you can quite comfortably read what is put in front of you. And that is the real goal there, because then you can start reading words that are not familiar and you still feel confident that you read them correctly, and it doesn't feel so daunting. It is really the smallest possible step. First, you learn a letter, then you learn to combine these letters, and then you learn the vocabulary.
That sounds very gentle, doesn't it? I mean, I'm sure, when people look at these languages, I mean, I think Korean's probably a nice example that you gave there. Some people say, oh, it's really, really easy. And then other people look at it and they look, oh, wow, that looks really difficult. And like you say, you see words that you start to say them. And I felt this myself with Korean. After going through your book, I was starting to read things. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I had that feeling just the other week, actually. I read something in Korean. I saw 안녕 for 안녕하세요, and it was just like for hello. And I was like, oh, I can read it. That's so cool. Still, even though I don't use it anymore.
It's exactly like little children, they drive their parents mad, reading every little sign that they see on walking around, like this says Ford, and this says kiwi, and this says this, and the parents are, yeah, sure, we know, but for children it's so exciting, and I think it can be similarly exciting for language learners.
What about the actual handwriting of languages? I mean, do we learn to handwrite all of these languages too? And is there a big difference? Is it a different thing?
It engages a different part of your brain, definitely. And especially in Chinese, you may learn to handwrite characters from muscle memory. So it's not that you remember what they look like or how to write them consciously, but your hand kind of remembers how to do it. The same way that you remember how to input your PIN at an ATM. So you're kind of moving across that without consciously remembering the numbers. You just remember how your hand moves. And that is how you wind up knowing Chinese characters, which also means as soon as you stop handwriting them, you lose this memory. And then you have to rely on your conscious memory, and you're kind of like visualizing how the character looks in order to try to recall it again. But I think maybe Chinese is a special case with this muscle memory. In other languages, it is more of a choice whether you use handwriting or typing. I must say that when you handwrite these languages, it stays in memory. I think that it helps with memorization. To handwrite compared to typing, it is more personal, I guess. It has a more direct connection to you.
It's interesting you say that, the actual benefits for the learning process, because, I mean, in my head, I've got kind of voices that have spoken to me before on this topic, shouting at me, but we just type everything nowadays, and we're online, and we have autocorrect, and you just write the pinyin, and the letters come up, and you can just write it as it comes out, these sort of autocorrects or spell checkers or whatever they are. But you're saying actually the handwriting bit and actually getting to is the muscle memory, and it's the actual the hard legwork that you need to do to actually get this into your brain.
Well, it helps. I'm not saying you have to do it. People have been known to learn the languages without it, but if you do it, it will definitely help.
And I think, yeah, you're right. I think people need to just see how it works for themselves, right? And see. But it's really good to kind of hear there is value in doing it, even if that's not what you intend to do in the end. There is potentially value in doing it anyway.
Yeah, and there are situations where you have to be able to write things. Like if you want to pass your friend a note, and you're at a restaurant and not at the computer, you have to be able to do that, right? So on some level, you need to be able to write. But whether you go into the deep end and you find like a really fancy pen and a fancy notebook and you write like pages upon pages upon pages, and you study how to write formal language and all that, or you just use it as a tool in order to better remember dialogues and easy vocabulary and so on. It's basically up to you.
It's interesting you mentioned pens and writing, because that just leads me to the next thought I had on this. And that's, people talk about cursive writing. And in fact, for English, I think some schools have stopped teaching children to write cursive letters. But in some languages like Russian, for example, you see this a lot, and it's quite heavily pushed to learners. Learn to understand and read and write the cursive script for the Cyrillic for Russian or for other languages that use a Cyrillic script or a version of the Cyrillic script. Overall, how important is the Cyrillic script, the cursive script now? Being able to write in a cursive manner, is it something that we still need to do? Is it just dying off?
I think it really depends on the language. Obviously, you want to be able to read it, right? Because you'll always come across postcards and letters and restaurant menus and the like still written in cursive. Whether you're able to do it yourself, it's basically up to you. If you, in the hypothetical situation I gave earlier, if you want to pass your friend a note, I think you could get away with passing that note in block letters, even if it takes longer to write. So that's your personal choice and probably influenced which language you're learning, with the possible exception of Hebrew, where the cursive writing is not actually a form of connected writing. It's disconnected letters like the other set of letters that are used by computers. But these letters are used universally when you handwrite. It's like when you type, you use one set of letters, and when you handwrite, you use the other set of letters. And when you have websites that have text in italics, they also use these handwriting kind of letters. So that is the case where you have like a kind of alphabet that is completely ingrained in the language. But like you said, in English, it is becoming less important. In Russian, it's more important. In Arabic, this difference basically doesn't exist because everything is connected. Okay, there's slight differences, but it really depends on the language. And you should see what your friends do. Find people your age group, find tutors, and ask them how useful it is. Or whether you want to, some people just learn it because they like it, like they learn the old Mongolian script rather than the Cyrillic Mongolian script. The old Mongolian, it looks kind of like Arabic but written top to down, and it's really pretty. And you may want to learn to write that script just because it's pretty. I'm not stopping you.
Well, I mean, there's calligraphy as well, isn't there, I suppose, in some of these languages, just for like art form. Like Arabic is really well known for this, because people draw pictures using the Arabic language in its written form to depict all sorts of things, stories, and they even write kind of stories around or words or phrases or whatever it is, and they turn it into a picture, and it's quite beautiful.
Yes, it's also something that people try with Chinese calligraphy, and if you're into calligraphy, yes, this would be a way to engage in your passion and at the same time study a foreign language.
Do you see emojis as a universal script when you talk about languages? Because, I mean, we talk about writing them, but also emojis have been quite the thing online particularly. Are these universal too?
Almost. There are some that are universal, just like facial expressions can be universal, but some of the other ones, objects are also probably universal, but when it comes to some of the gesture emojis, they can have different meaning depending on the country, and also there may be a different culture of using particular emojis, in the same way that some countries don't have the same standards for showing particular facial expressions. Like in Japan, everyone is very guarded, and it really takes a huge event to make people show emotions as freely as, say, Americans do. So, you can kind of use emojis as a very, very basic level to show how you feel about something mainly, or for a few common objects, but beyond that, no.
And do you think that they have with emojis these generational differences as well? For example, how millennials or Gen X or boomers or Gen Z will use emojis compared to the other generations, for example. And with that, do you think that changes?
It is a generational thing. Also based on the subculture. Like if you go into anime forums, you will see people use completely different emojis. Sometimes even those horizontal emojis, not the actual icons, but and not the way we spell them in English with a semicolon and a dash or something, but they write their emotions horizontally in the Japanese style. So it's quite fascinating how people learn these, and it's partly generational, but also partly associated with the subcultures of the internet and when someone first used the internet.
I mean, you didn't grow up bilingually, but you have really become this established and well-respected polyglot. How has that actually come to pass? How did that happen?
I don't know. I think it was inborn. Because as a child, I didn't have any exposure to foreign languages. So growing up in a small town in a completely monolingual family, even my parents didn't know any foreign language, no English, no nothing. So I'm not exactly sure why, but I was always fascinated by foreign cultures and foreign languages, and I was inventing my own languages and my own alphabets and the Korean style kind of script and the hieroglyphics kind of script. And so I was already reading popular science books on linguistics when I was 14 years old, and then I discovered online forums and found that I was not the only one with such crazy interests.
But on this journey with learning languages, clearly, like for everyone else, I'm sure you've had your own challenges and obstacles along the way. Which have been the most memorable or greatest, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the first challenge I faced growing up in a small town was that I just didn't have anyone nearby who could engage with me about languages or teach me languages. I didn't have a car, so getting to the next town over to take classes was not really a possibility. Fortunately, I was able to study several languages at my high school, but the biggest breakthrough came when I discovered online learning. And this was the really early days. I remember learning Esperanto through an email course where you receive the lessons in like a Word document, and then you send back the answers, and your mentor checks them and sends back the next lesson. So that is what I did for a while, and then I discovered online tutoring, audio chats, Paltalk, Skype, the usual. And so that really shaped me. I still rely on online tutors a lot more than in-person tutors, and I think there are several advantages of that, because they can write everything that you hear, and they actually do it when you tell them to. And then afterwards you have a record of what you want to study. And the other major challenge was basically more recently, because I work freelance. I don't have a regular day schedule, no time I need to check in or check out. My work life is completely mixed, my work and my regular life. So basically, it's very easy to do a language study, because it feels like there's messages from colleagues, they're waiting on this, that, and the other, or study languages afterwards, and afterwards your brain is not online anymore. And so what really helped me there was to invent rituals. Like nowadays, I always start my day on the couch with a sun lamp. Very important in European winters. The sun lamp kind of replaces sunlight when it's darker over here. And I sit on the couch with my sun lamp on, and I study my vocabulary in Anki. And that's just become a regular thing, a ritual. And I also schedule time with tutors. I schedule time that I want to do other tasks that I set myself to, and that really helps.
Overall, I mean, you've been learning languages for a long time, and it's clearly been a very important thing for you. But can you put into words what language learning means or has meant to you through your life, and what you've gained from it?
For me, it's mainly the connection with people. Even when we have a different common language, like most of my colleagues at DM25, the work language of the organization is English. So I could be speaking English to them, but when I speak Greek to them, or when I speak Serbo-Croatian to them, or Italian, or any of these languages, it just feels different. You immediately have a different quality of relationship, a more direct connection to that person. Languages have also gotten me a lot of material benefits, if I say so, work opportunities, jobs, and so on. But it's not really an effect of the languages themselves in my case, because my skills are not so much related to languages. I work in web development, so it's more like languages increase the surface area of luck, really. When you know different languages, you move in different communities, you hear about completely different things that are happening. You're not just connecting with people from your town, but from people on the other side of the globe who may have really interesting projects or interesting things happening that you hear about, that you're more informed about. I think you just become aware of a lot more things.
It sounds like you use languages in many, many aspects of your life. I mean, can you say in words how you use your languages on a day-to-day basis?
I mainly use them at work with my colleagues, not that I need to, but we have work meetings in Greek, for example, sometimes, or just when I send them private messages, I use the language that we're both comfortable with. I use languages here in Berlin with the opportunities we have here with the tourist, or just now there was a Greek movie festival, so watching movies. I also really, really like reading. My background is blurred, but if you could see it, there is this huge bookcase, and I love reading in different languages because so very little gets translated, even to English. At one point, I looked at the top 10 best-selling Chinese novels of the past few years, and out of the top 10, less than 5 had been translated to English, and those are the top-selling ones. Now imagine what happens to niche books that may interest you, but nobody else. So I really, really love seeing the world through books in different languages.
Finally, just what are the key techniques, tips and tricks that you would recommend to any of our listeners to start improving their writing today?
If you're learning a foreign writing system, you need to really take it step by step to work on one letter at a time, and then practice reading with words that you will recognize. If you don't want to buy one of my books, or it doesn't exist for the language that you're studying, like Thai, unfortunately it doesn't exist yet, you can also use Wikipedia, like get a list of cities, or a list of country names, or a list of personal names, and you'll probably recognize most of them. But independently of whether you're learning a foreign script or just another language written in the Latin alphabet, you need to find the atmosphere, the situation that makes writing pleasurable for you. It could be setting up a particular desk with a candle or some nice music. It could be getting a beautiful notebook, a particular pen. Do whatever it takes to feel comfortable, and then initially copy out correct language like dialogues or whatever you plan to use yourself, and afterwards create, get your creative juices flowing, start writing your own dialogues, maybe even write your own poetry or short stories. Get a random list of words and tell yourself, I'm going to write a poem using these words, and it'll be easier than if you had to write a poem from scratch.
Wow, what an inspiring way to finish today. Thank you so much for joining me, Udit, and look forward to speaking to you again. And I'm sure if anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably on Twitter. My Twitter handle is German Polyglot. But if you're not on Twitter, I also have a blog, which is at learnlangs.com.
A massive thank you to Judith Meyer for joining me on the Language Podcast. Over the course of the series, we've covered all of the fundamentals of language learning. Getting started, speaking, pronunciation, listening, reading and writing. In the next episode, we'll reflect on everything we've learnt with the wonderful Fadi Boukaram. Fadi is a Lebanese-born photographer who's amassed hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok, where he discusses his love for languages and culture. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that one. Get in touch and let me know what you've learned from Udit today. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Bye bye for now.